Well, thank you, Gary. First of all, it's never an inconvenience to come up here. I enjoy it. It's the highlight of my winter. I leave for Florida in 2 days. I know we've broken up about that. It's a dirty job down there. Collected Coach Taylor and the Blue Devils tonight as they pursue the Western Big Six Championship. Last 2 home games. Go ahead, Sean. I'm going to throw out several topics today of the recent vintage in the sports world, and then I'll discuss a little bit, and then I'd like to have any questions, all questions you want to have answered, try to have answered at least after that. I guess the most recent event was Chris Carpenter, Cardinal right-hander, being declared out for the season pretty much with the recurrence of that nerve issue that pretty much cost him last season too. First, I guess this comes as no surprise. He's missed 4 years of the 10 that he's been with the Cardinals, but and last year he won no games in the regular season and won in the playoffs, but his effect is beyond that. I think you could see when he came back to play in September and in the playoffs that the Cardinals played better, even though they didn't win a lot of games that he pitched. And that's a lot like against Ray Lewis with the Baltimore Ravens. So Lewis missed much of the season, came back. I don't think he had any tackles last Sunday in that game, but he's a spiritual leader, and his team played better when he was on the field. Now, what does this mean to the Cardinals this season? I think if Carpenter's around a lot to lend his leadership to the young pitching staff that they're going to have with Lynn and Rosenthal and maybe Kelly and Miller, that would be great. He's not going to be on the field, and that might be good too, because I don't think he was very good when he came back last year. He just didn't seem to have the same everything that he had before. And it makes it easier for Mike Matheny maybe to employ these young guys and not have to tell Carpenter, hey, I've got to move you out of the rotation. This other guy is better than you. That question's probably been solved. So I'm hoping Carpenter stays around, because that's a big part of their success, even if he doesn't pitch. The Hall of Fame election was about a month ago, and the Veterans election was a little bit before that. So this year's electees, there's 3 electees, and none of them have been alive in the last 75 years. So that may make for a little smaller attendance at the hall than usual. But they're going to have some good ones coming up. This next ballot, you could have Greg Maddux get in. The next players available would also be including Jeff Kent, Tom Glavine, Frank Thomas, Mike Mussina are the headliners from the next ballot that will come out. Craig Biggio came close this year, and he might be a candidate also. Then the Veterans Committee this year, which can elect managers, former players, former executives, umpires, has a chance to have Bobby Cox, Joe Torre, and my co-author to go in the Hall of Fame next year, Tony La Russa. And that will be a ceremony. They could have as many as 6, 7 guys up there next year. John Shearholz, the great Braves executive. So the Hall of Fame is going to have big classes from here on out. All these great Braves pitchers that like Glavine, Smoltz. Well, Smoltz will be coming up the year after that. Glavine probably won't get in this next year, because I think people don't perceive him as good as Maddux. But they're going to have a lot of people come in the next 4 or 5 years. Bonds and Clemens, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens did all right in the balloting this year for their first time. They got between 30 and 40%, and I think the general feeling of the writers is they're kind of serving this time in purgatory here for what they did or didn't do with performance-enhancing drugs. And I think ultimately they're going to get in, but they're not going to be first ballot guys. And that probably is all that most of my brothers wanted to see. They didn't want them to be first ballot guys. I do think they'll get in. I think Biggio will also get in. Some people are maybe upset he didn't get into 3,000 hits, but that's really all he had going for him. He wasn't a leader in any category when he played. He just endured a long time to have 3,000 hits, which is certainly Hall of Fame worthy, but I don't think first ballot worthy. And speaking of Hall of Famers, we of course touched on the Stan Musial, the great career he had, and the great funeral that was held in St. Louis. I guess it was about 2 weeks ago now. Bob Costas did a wonderful oratory, kind of comparing Stan and Mickey Mantle, to whom he also spoke at that service. If there's anything good that might have come out of this, is that Stan Musial finally got maybe the attention nationally that we always thought he never got. People were reading stories about him and looking at these numbers and saying, wow, this guy was pretty good. Well, yeah, he was pretty good. On to the Cardinals for this year. I think despite the fact that they've been deep into the playoffs the last 2 years, they have not come close to winning the division title. So you got to consider them really a second-place team these last 2 years. But I think they can contend for the division title this year. I like their pitching staff for the most part, especially the bullpen. Young starters, you don't know how they're going to do, but there's hope there. The lineup is good. The bench is pretty good. There are some issues. Second base is one with Descalzo with 227 last year as the incumbent. Matt Carpenter is going to try to play there, but if he can play there but isn't real good defensively, what's the use of having him bat 3 times then come out of the game when you most need him in the game from the 6th inning on? So I'd rather have him come off the bench like he's done before, where they can use him where they want to. I consider the shortstop spot to be a bigger hole. You've got Percal, who didn't play the last month because of this torn ligament in his right elbow, did play in the postseason. Eschewed surgery is said to be all right, but we don't know how he is until he makes that first or second throw from the hole in spring training to see if he can actually get it over there. They have other options, I guess. Pete Kozma did well at the end of the regular season, did well in the Washington series, played very poorly, I thought, in the San Francisco series, especially defensively. And there's Ronnie Cedeno. Well, even the staunchest Cub fans here will know perhaps that Ronnie Cedeno was not the answer in 2005, 6, or 7. Perhaps will not be the answer now either, but he is available. But if you have to rely on him, that's not a good look there. You've got to keep your eye on, and you've heard all about him, is Oscar Taveras, a 20-year-old Dominican outfielder who played in Springfield last year. He's won 3 straight batting titles. His teams have won 3 straight championships. He's a left-handed hitter, left-handed thrower, 6'2", 180. Best hitting prospect since Albert came up through the system, probably. Better that he start the season in AAA, I guess, because you got Beltran in right, you got Jay in center, Holliday in left, Alan Craig at first. There really isn't any spot for him right now. But if they need a jump start during the season, if he's doing well in AAA, one of those, how you're going to keep him down in the farm. You know, you bring him up and you figure it out later. But this is a guy to keep your eye on. Colton Wong, to a lesser degree, the second baseman, #1 pick a couple years ago, will be at AAA also this year. He'll be the second baseman next year. So the Cardinals, after all these years of having a crappy farm system, now have one of the best in baseball, especially pitchers. They got another wave of pitchers behind the ones that we're talking about now, Rosenthal, Kelly, and Miller. They have Waka from Texas A&M, their first pick last year, Carlos Martinez, and 5 or 6 others that are just have wonderful arms. I asked Red Schoendienst late in the season, when was the last time he'd seen this many good young arms in the Cardinals system? He said the 40s. No. On to the rest of baseball a little bit. How about the Yankees? They got Alex Rodriguez on their payroll for 3 more years at 28 to $30 million a year. He's had his surgery. He's probably out for the year. He's linked to more steroids again, and I'm sure the Yankees would desperately either try to not have to pay his salary or unload him to somebody else if he could play. And I don't think he's going to be able to play much this year. Good luck. Nobody's going to feel sorry for the Yankees. They'll say, sorry, you're stuck with them. And now he's going to be in a Hall of Fame class, much like Bonds and Clemens. Now he's going to be tainted when his name comes up anywhere from 6 to 8 to 10 years from now. Maybe he'll get it at some point, maybe he won't. But the Yankee dynasty is sort of fading here, I think. You've got Derek Jeter, a 40-ish shortstop, coming back off a broken leg. He suffered in the playoffs. You don't know how mobile he's going to be. You've got Kevin Youkilis now playing third base for them, so there could be a lot of ground balls sneaking through that left side. In fact, this might be the first year in 20 years that neither the Yankees nor Boston make the playoffs, which would be, I think, kind of good for baseball, maybe. See if you're paying attention back there. I'm going to call this year's pennant winners as Detroit and Cincinnati. They haven't played since, I believe, 1940 in the World Series, but Cincinnati has the great rotation, whether Aroldis Chapman, the hard-throwing left-hander, is in it or not. And a great bullpen if he is in it with Jonathan Broxton. Okay lineup, pretty good defense. The Tigers have Cabrera and Fielder, who they had last year. Victor Martinez, who was out all last season, should be able to play this year. And they picked up Torrey Hunter as a free agent for their offense to be a little bit better. And then they got Verlander, the great right-hander, and Max Scherzer, also a top-flight pitcher. So I would think we're going to see a couple of maybe small market clubs. I think Detroit wins this series in 7 games, and Jim Leyland retires as manager after having won 2 World Series. On that note, Questions, please. Yes, sir.
Assuming Carpenter doesn't start at second and everyone else struggles, and Long has a hot start, do you think he makes the team?
Only if he's going to play every day. I don't think you can keep a guy like that on the bench. But yeah, he's going to have to be really good though, because he kind of faded in the second half of last season at Springfield. He didn't do quite as well. So I think they'll keep an eye on how he does at least the first half of the season in Memphis. But a good question. But he would have to play every day, just as Tavares would have to play every day too to make their team out of Springfield.
So Sarah, what is your sense of urgency for Wainwright's contract, and how's that Quincy deal going to play?
Good questions. And we asked John Mozeliak about that, the first one the other day, and he said they were independent, Wainwright's contract and Carpenter's retiring. But I do think that you have to have Wainwright at the head of the staff after this year, because that would leave, if he's not there next year, Jaime Garcia is the veteran of the staff. That probably is not something you want to have. His leadership skills are somewhat, I think, suspect there maybe. But on the Cardinals side, I think they want to see Wainwright pitch a little bit this year. He was 14 and 13 last year for a team that was 14 over 500. He was 1 over. About half the time he was the old Wainwright. He had 3 shutouts, and maybe the other half of the time he was not that good. I think it would behoove both sides to wait and see how he does the first couple months of the season. Hernandez got this $175 million from the Mariners yesterday for 7 years. Wainwright's 32. Hernandez is like 26, 27, I think, maybe not but I would think he'd ask for 5 years and would hope to get $80 or $90 million out of it, but I don't know that he'll get anything like Hernandez money. But the Cardinals do need to have him because of his ability and his leadership skills too, because you don't want to have a staff of Garcia, Lance, Rosenthal, Miller, Kelly. Those are nice arms, but there isn't anybody to kind of steer them in the right direction there.
Any chance Kyle Lowe's could still be in the picture?
We asked John Mozeliak the other day that same question, and he kind of danced around it. I guess he's never out of the picture. Here we are, February 8th, and he's not signed by anybody yet. So if there was a small deal, like a 1-year deal, I guess he could be. But they think these young guys can do this.
You know, they picked him up on the last day of spring training when they got him.
Yeah, I know. I think if he runs out of options, he might make a phone call himself. I'm surprised he let Scott Boras take this long already. You would think that Texas and the Angels would have need for him, maybe even Boston. But maybe they're asking for too many years. Maybe they're asking for 5 or 6 years, and Lowe's is now 34, 35, I think, coming up.
What are they offering? 13?
13.3 million was like a qualifying offer for free agents. And no, he thought he could get more. And Annabelle Sanchez from the Tigers got 5 for 80. A Boras client, not as good as Loesch, but also only 28 years old, so that's why he got the money. I think Loesch would, the reason he probably hasn't said much so far is that he lives in Arizona, so if he signs with an Arizona team, like in Texas or the Angels who train out there, he doesn't have to worry about accommodations for the spring and so forth. If he signed with the Boston or the Park or somebody, he had to get in the high gear and get his family ready to move. But I would think he's in the picture, but not very much into it.
Does Loesch have the same problem as Bourne does with this draft pick and the slot money and all that stuff?
Probably so. The rules are that the team that signs him also, besides losing that draft pick, loses the money that draft pick would have commanded in the draft. So you get only a certain pool of money you can spend on your draft picks, and so teams are looking at that and say, wait a minute, I'm losing the draft pick and money too? No, if this guy isn't going to guarantee me a pennant, and Kyle Loesch is not going to guarantee you a pennant. He can make it a little bit better. So yeah, that's a big factor. Now, the Cardinals are the only team that can sign him without losing the draft pick. So there is that advantage they have there. But where does he fit in? If he comes back, that means Rosenthal, some of those guys are probably a step behind. If they knew that Garcia was going to be good, they wouldn't be worried about this. If they knew he wasn't going to be able to pitch, then they'd have to go after a guy like that, but it might be too late then.
After the question, were you for or against the 1-game playoff? I mean,
I was against it at first. I think I still am. There ought to be a way to play 2 out of 3 in that round. Even though the Cardinals won that, and that's fine for everybody around here. The Braves played as bad as they possibly could have played in that game, and that was the only chance they had. I mean, their season was ruined by the fact they couldn't catch the ball or throw it straight for one game. And if they'd been able to play 2 out of 3, they might have won the thing. So I think I know baseball's cluttered up with worried about playing in November and stuff like that. Well, they're playing virtually in March now. Which is the worst weather, November or March? And I would like to see 2 out of 3. I was all right the way the one gamers worked out, but I'm sure the Texas Rangers and the Braves weren't too hot about it. Yes?
Do you consider Molina the team leader at this point, or?
Yeah, and I don't know that means necessarily he has to be out there holding clubhouse meetings all the time, but I think his work ethic is one to be admired. He plays every day. Most catchers play hurt anyway, but he plays more than most catchers. That means he's probably hurt more too. If of all the players, and they have a good group of players, they have a lot of hard workers. Holiday, Craig, they don't have any guys who don't work there. But yeah, he's the guy, and he speaks so rarely. When he does have something to say, it's like, oh, okay, better listen to this, because Yachty's stirred up a little bit. Yeah, he's the one, and maybe Wainwright now on the pitching side.
I think I read maybe one of your stories that Stan Musial got 93% of the Hall of Fame vote. Do you know what the other 7% of those people were thinking? With the Hummel situation a year in advance, what is your feeling as to how, both sides put out their own rhetoric about it? What's your thought about what that whole situation was about?
On the first part, yeah, it's hard to believe that that 7% of the voters, which would be about maybe when Stan was being elected, maybe 300 to 350. So what is that? Enough anyway. 21, 22 voters wouldn't have voted for him. You notice most of the highest votes came from the New York players like Tom Seaver. Jeter will be in that 97, 98 percentile. Some guys in those days just sent the ballots back blank because they didn't think anybody could be as good as Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and all those guys. Ty Cobb went in right away. Well, Gehrig didn't right away, but Ruth and Cobb did. Secondly, Pujols thing was it ended up being about money. I mean, the Angels gave more money, and now does it cost more to live out there? Yeah, and I think Albert wanted a little bit more from the Cardinals, who probably didn't press the issue as hard as some people wanted because they knew they had coverage with Craig and Beltran and anybody else they had on their club. I think that the sentiment is now such that if Albert came back, people would be okay with that. He said to the Angels, I want to go back to the Cardinals, which isn't going to happen, but that rhetoric against him died down pretty fast, and the fact that the Angels did not make the playoffs made some people happy. But the fact that Albert showed up at Stan's private service and also at the funeral, I think made a lot of points for Albert, what kind of guy he is, regardless of the contract and the fact that he chose to change teams. I think that some of the harshest feelings against him are probably gone now. Yes?
How do you think the stadium issue for the Rams is going to get resolved?
I think the only way it can be is get a new stadium, which means that Kroenke, I'm sure, will have to pony up a lot of that, but it's hard to believe that city and county residents and voters are going to...
They're still paying for the one they just built.
Yeah, I know. There's no way they can make that dome any better than a lot better than what it is and make it a top-tier facility. There's been 22 venues built since they moved to the dome, and the only way it can't be is have a new place either out west or there's a little bit very north of downtown there, or someplace else. But it looks like it would have to be almost all privately financed, which I know Kroenke has that kind of money, but does he have that kind of initiative to do that?
Illinois got plenty of money.
Well, yeah. You call them the Sauget Rams, man. They already have a building for Kroenke cheerleaders over there. No trials necessary.
They strip the ball.
Well, yes, they do. See here. Yes, sir.
Two questions. If Boston and New York are out of it by the middle of the season, will ESPN then just stop showing baseball?
They'll show previous Boston, New York. Pedro Martinez and Zimmer fighting again.
If Carpenter were to go ahead and retire, that would relieve the Cardinals of his salary obligation, would it not?
I think at some point, after it
And
goes
wouldn't that
through,
be, I mean, could you see the direction?
they could reach an agreement of some sort. I would think they wouldn't mind paying Carpenter his money if he chooses to come to all the home games and aids as kind of a de facto pitching coach, especially for the younger pitchers. But maybe he'll decide that after he goes through the routine of seeing all the doctors and so forth, that he actually has no chance to pitch anymore. He might say, you know, let's settle this off the books here, and maybe I'll get 6, 7, 8, or defer. So he's not gonna pitch again, no. I mean, all the work he did to come back from that thing last year, and he pitched 6 games, and the same thing happened. That would destroy any man's spirit, and he's almost 38 years old now, so. But I think they'll get it settled somehow, where they won't have to pay him the whole $11 million.
Do you see him going into coaching at all?
He'd be a good one. He has, a couple of younger kids. I would think at first you'll see him go to Florida just for 2 or 3 weeks to get out of the bad weather and hang around his old teammates and give his family a vacation and do a little work. Kind of like Matheny did for a few years. He showed up as a catching instructor for a while before he got interested in doing this managing full time. So I would think he'd be a great pitching coach. Does he want to be away from his family when he's not playing? I would say probably not just yet.
Could you give a report card on Matheny's first year?
I would say probably a B at the end of the year. Early on, first half of the season, he was kind of walking on eggshells, not exactly knowing how to handle media for one thing. He didn't do a bad job of it, he just didn't know when we needed to have our time and when we didn't need to have it. And the players, I think, all played hard. They all had his back. They knew he was due. Later in the year, I thought he got better at changing pitchers, where he wouldn't be so hesitant to pull the trigger. Now he got Loesch out there real fast in the last playoff game, which didn't make Loesch feel very good. I might have been too quick with him, but at least he was able to make that decision rather than go out there and leave a guy in for 6, 7 innings and have him fail when it was too late. So I'd say he was better, and now he has a good veteran team. He should be all right. I think most of the hurdles he's cleared them, and people aren't looking for him to be the next LaRussa or next Whitey Herzog or Red or anybody like that, or Vern Rapp. Yes,
Rick, 2 things. One, do you think they'll miss McGuire as their hitting coach? And second, how is Tony doing now that he's had a whole year away? Not really away, but is he adjusted?
Yeah, Tony still wants to be with a team. As he said, he misses the wins and the losses. I said, what do you mean? You never enjoyed losing. You lost 2,200 games. You never enjoyed any of them. But he's working for the commissioner's office, and I suspect he'll have a lot to do with the World Baseball Classic, which is being played starting next month. And there's overseas and then here at a couple of venues. And he handled one of those tournaments in Jupiter last fall when they had a qualifier. Now that Torrey is actually managing the U.S. team, Tony will probably need to coordinate the rest of that stuff. So he kind of enjoys that. Commissioner Seelig sends him around to feel the pulse of executives and managers and players and so forth. So until he gets that job, and I don't think it's managing, but I wouldn't be surprised, let's say if the Dodgers don't do well with all the money they spent, that they wouldn't, put LaRussa on a call and say, hey, can you bail us out here? I don't think he wants to manage. That might be a team he would go to, being on the West Coast and being real talented. But he's okay with it. He's okay with what he's doing. He's signing books furiously, for all the proceeds that he's made go to the Animal Rescue Foundation, and most of mine go to the new house that I've got. Water heaters that blew up. And
No wedding.
Yeah, it's all gone.
How about McGuire?
McGuire, yes. I think he'll be missed. I think he was really good for guys like Craig, who especially has an uppercut stroke. He was good for Freeze. He was good for all of them, pretty much, although maybe Molina's his own hitting coach, and Albert was his hitting coach when Albert was here. And Mabry will be good, but yeah, I think McGuire will be missed. And he really took an intense interest in every hitter. Didn't pay much attention to film, was more into actual, okay, here's what, see it, hit it, look at the counts, don't worry about that video stuff, you can backstop yourself with that. But yeah, I think the Dodgers have benefited and the Cardinals not. At least he's at home and he's happier there. He's got, you know, he's got, what, 5 kids under 10, you know, he's doing triplets, so he needs to be home probably. Yes?
Can you kind of comment on how the restructuring in the post dispatch, how that's gonna affect the baseball coverage?
Well, Derek Gould, who was the backup to Joe Strauss, is going to be the lead Cardinal writer now. And Joe is going to be writing columns, and he's doing very well at that. And I'm out of mothballs to some extent to be the backup beat guy again now and do some national work. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. It sounds good in theory here, but if my old bones can handle it still. But that's the way it goes so far as we speak. We'll be checking in July, see how I'm doing. Yes?
Rick, who would you consider the surprise teams in each league this year?
I would say, well, Toronto probably is not going to be a surprise anymore with all the money they've spent acquiring people and signing people. It'd probably be a surprise if they didn't do well. Let's say you're looking for teams that might be better than, I think Arizona will come back this year. They've got a good young nucleus, pretty good pitching staff. I think in the American League, I think you'll see the White Sox be surprisingly bad this year. And maybe Cleveland to be a little bit better. Francona's a good manager if you give him some decent players. Kansas City could be one too. I thought they would be the ones last year, but they lost their catcher right away in Perez, and they lost Sawyer for the year too. So maybe them, but let's say Arizona and Cleveland, and Chicago to be surprisingly bad, and the Cubs to be, well, they won't lose 100 this year. Is that a surprise? That's a surprise.